All right, let's move on to our next engagement now. As tributes continue to pour in, the Mandela family has been meeting to discuss the funeral arrangements of a struggle activist and ambassador to Denmark, Zindzi Mandela. So the daughter of struggle icons Winnie, Madikizela-Mandela and Nelson Mandela died in a Johannesburg hospital in the early hours of Monday morning. She was 59. Her next ambassadorial posting would have been to Liberia. Her son, Zondwa Mandela, joins me now live tonight via Skype. Mr. Mandela, condolences to you, first of all, as a family, and thank you very much for agreeing to speak to us here on SABC News.
Hi, Griselda. Thank you for the encouraging message and the message of support.
Zondwa, I'm sure, how are you as the children and the rest of the family holding up during this difficult time?
Look, Griselda, it has been a very difficult experience. My mother left behind my brother Zwelabo, Bambata, my sister Zolega, and myself. I think what's important is that she raised strong-willed, children, and she just, raised us to always have hope. And so, as much as this has been quite difficult, I think with the emotional intelligence that she imparted, we've been managing this particular experience quite well, I'd say. The rest of the family is doing well. When we just, when I reflect on it daily, I know my mother loved us greatly. And I think it's also very difficult to say, but one is probably happy that she did not have to experience burying one of her children.
Zondwa, this must have come as a shock, as you indicate, to all of you, as it has been to the rest of the world. Are you able, as a family at this stage, to tell us anything more about what led to your mother's death?
Look, Griselda, there's been a complete and full autopsy done on her passing, but obviously such reports take time to come out. There were other tests that were conducted, and my mother did in fact test positive for COVID-19 on the day of her passing. Although, this doesn't therefore mean that she died of COVID-related complications, but simply that she tested positive for it. But having known that, nonetheless, there were several other tests done, and those tests will give us further information as to what could have actually led to her untimely death.
I totally understand that, and thanks to you as the family for transparency on that, as I think the rest of the world, everyone battles with the COVID-19 pandemic. Zondwa, aside from, the politics and the professional life, what role did she play as a mother to you as children? There's a lot that we will read and, about your mother, but, as children, what role did she play in your lives?
One of the greatest strengths of my mother is that she was a resilient, fighter. And, those were, one of the traits that, we really took on as a founding lesson. I think also very importantly, she, was an amazing mother who ensured that we were given the strength to live according to our own purpose and journey. For someone who came from such a strong family, she knew that she needed to impart our own identity within us so that we could actually lead and carry on our own legacies.
Zondwa, how would you want your mother to be remembered?
I think for the good-natured person she was. She was, a person that connected the family to, its cultural roots. She was a person who loved love. She had a great amount of friends, and I think we just want to, continue to celebrate that happy side and that amazing side of her, but also just, ensuring that she was someone who remained true to herself, was, free to speak her mind regardless of the occasion. And I just think, many South Africans, many people across the world could actually just learn from that need for us to be individuals and to live our own purpose in order to actually achieve great things within this very difficult world that we live in.
Zondwa, I just want to come back to an earlier point that you made. Given the fact that, we find ourselves in a position, where the COVID-19 pandemic is ravaging the world, you did say that Zindzi Mandela had tested positive for COVID-19, but you are still running the necessary tests at this point to establish whether that had led to her death. I understand that, but as a family, is that what you're discussing at the moment, or waiting, of course, for that autopsy to reveal what kind, I guess, then of a send-off your mom will have?
No, I mean, look, as things stand, Griselda, simply by virtue of the fact that there was a positive test, we are therefore obligated to function and work within the framework of the existing regulation related to such cases. The full autopsy has in fact been completed, and so therefore those reports will come whenever they do come. But as things stand, just because of that, very specific element, we are going to, conform to the laws and regulations, and we just really focus on giving her a very respectable, send-off without, trying to make this a entirely a COVID-related case. But I think for us it was very important to be transparent and honest in relation to it, so that we're also managing other lives and just being considerate of our responsibility when actually dealing with this unfortunate pandemic.
Yeah. And as a result of this, I don't really want to pry too much during this time, Zondwa. I would presume that other members of the family perhaps have also gone for some kind of precautionary testing at this point.
Look, I mean, and that's the case, and there were many close people, to my mother, and so therefore we've taken all the necessary steps to make sure that everyone is cleared of anything, that everyone's health is intact, because I think, if anything, these experiences just teach us that besides our own unfortunate experience, there are many other cases and many other things that we've heard of across the world, that we just want to make sure that we do not want to lose lives, not only as a family, but as a country.
Yeah. I know that the older sister as well, the ambassador to South Korea, Zindzi Mandela, has also just arrived in the country this afternoon. If you can confirm that for us, and I'm sure she must be amongst those who's also extremely devastated by what happened, in particular because perhaps, she was also not in the country at the time, unlike, I guess, the rest of you and other members of the family. How is she doing?
Look, and I honestly can't begin to imagine how difficult, it's been for. I mean, the two of them have really, have really led and give, some great examples for decades of their lives, and have actually always shared such a strong and pure bond. So yes, she did. She traveled and arrived in today, and just like we are all having a series of family meetings, which we're actually pretty much gone through as much as we can. But we're meeting and engaging even with my aunt via these online platforms. But the point is, she's here. Many members have already started congregating together, but congregating and still being mindful of, the various regulations, and just being, trying to keep as much space in between us as, to the extent of actually using online platforms to communicate.
Yeah. Zondwa, I know that you as a family are still meeting to decide on a date for the funeral arrangements. Has there been any consensus on that as well? I think many South Africans have been asking perhaps when is this likely to happen? Any way forward in terms of talks with your family on that?
Yes, I mean, look, we had to, I'd say we went through the final conversations and discussions in relation to the plannings today. So we can confirm that she'll be buried at 7 a.m. on Friday, this coming Friday. So, I mean, it was also kind of, tricky also coming to that particular decision because we had an option of, burying her on Saturday, but Saturday is actually the date of her father's birthday. So we then thought just to, kind of separate these particular occasions, let's bury her on Friday. And this was really just like a mixture of, decisions and supportive decisions, from her other sister Maki, from Mage. We just really have tried to play as much of a consultative process as much as the children are leading this particular this family experience, but we just ensure that it's contribution from the entire family so that we can all play an important part in sending someone off that we all equally love.
Just finally, Zondwa, obviously this would be in consultation with different arms of government so that she's also be able to get a befitting send-off. Obviously, I would imagine some of these discussions would include the African National Congress, which your sister, I beg your pardon, which your mom had, served from a very, very young age in her own right, fighting for freedom in this country.
Yes, and look, by virtue of these relationships that they've had, we have always kind of maintained close-knit relationships with these stakeholders, such as the African National Congress, and in fact with the government. I mean, they too were political figures. She served as an ambassador, as you mentioned, and so therefore there's a lot that comes into consideration as we consider all of the elements of her send-off. But I think very importantly, we as a family are just mindful of these contributions, and we're always willing to actually give audiences, rather an audience to these various stakeholders, because someone like my mother, who actually played a leadership role from such a young age, has built these key relationships that are not only fueled because of business interests, but simply because of they were fueled by an ideology that was driven by a passion, where they shared equal goals in terms of fighting for what's right in the context of South Africa.
Zondwa, just finally, I mean, how would you want South Africans? There's many perhaps would want to pass their condolences given the time that we're in. I was saying to a colleague of mine, I think many people would have gathered outside your grandma's house in Soweto, but unfortunately the time that we find ourselves in, many people cannot do that. Are there condolence books perhaps that South Africans would be able to sign? What is the agreement from the family in terms of those who would want to pass their condolences to you as a family? Any consensus on that?
Look, the primary platforms, Griselda, will be online platforms, and we'll actually just make an announcement either later this evening or first thing tomorrow morning. There'll be online platforms where people can actually send a lot of condolence messages. We will have physical presence for books to be signed, but in this case we want people to be very cautious. We're going to have a good management system there so that we do not allow any overcrowding, because we've actually intentionally locked down certain family spaces to avoid people congregating. But nonetheless, we will have some sort of physical presence for books to be signed. But I think most importantly will be the online platforms where people will be informed in due course, either later this evening or by tomorrow, where those links are for them to leave these messages.
Mr. Mandela, I know that you're extremely busy at this hour as you as the family continue to prepare for that final send-off of your mother. Condolences to you and your family once again. Thank you very much indeed for taking that moment to speak to us here on SABC News. We really do appreciate it. That was Zondwa Mandela, the son of late activist and ambassador to Denmark, Zindzi Mandela. Just some breaking news coming through there for him indicating that his mother mother had tested positive for COVID-19, but there is still an autopsy that is being conducted at this stage to establish whether that was indeed the cause of death. And also the family also confirming at this stage that Zindzi Mandela, the late ambassador to Denmark, will be buried at 7 a.m. on Friday. Of course, the family is still meeting at this point, and them indicating they're going to treat it in light of the current regulations that we find ourselves in as a country pertaining to the scourge of COVID-19 that we see. Condolence books as well will be put out, and certainly here on SABC News we'll give you an indication once we hear from the family once again about where exactly you would be able to assign those condolences books, because obviously given the current situation there's not going to be many people, of course, who will be invited to that final send-off. But here on SABC News we'll give you as much as possible, and that's where we'll have to leave it for now.